I went and Tony received me at his very small and tiny office where he did all the job by himself and maybe with the help of one or two people. That was the very beginning of Rabobank in Brazil. Today, Rabobank represents for sure the most important financial intermediary that handles issues connected to agribusiness in the country. It is a history of success. But the interesting point is that I arrived there and I talked to Tony about my intentions, and he said, you know, I think you have to go to Wageningen, and I'd like to introduce you to Professor Mühlenberg at the Wageningen University. And then you can speak to him and share your ideas. And then I came. That was the first time. And then we handled the first study that was named The Dutch and the Brazilian Agribusiness. I remember one thing. The co-author was a young student of mine at that time, Marcus Young. Today he's the president of Unica, the big organization of the Brazilian ethanol companies. So that was the seed money that Rabobank put at that time to help us. And since then, we have had a continuous contacts with Tony de Boon. His views about how Brazil was, what was the path ahead to do in that country, and his views about the cooperation between universities and private sector, his views about the future of Latin American and the future of the agribusiness worldwide have been an inspiration of our activities. So this book represents, more than other things, just the encapsulates those ideas, encapsulates the relevance of the support of private institutions like Rabobank, which is a cooperative bank, and represents also the relevance of international cooperation and how much we learn from the University of Wageningen and how much we learn from Rabobank and how much we owe to you, Tony de Boon. Thank you very much.
Nonetheless, I've been asked to say a few things about my experiences in Brazil, and it's not for nothing I wear the Brazilian Dutch flags here on my coat, because I happen to be a Dutchman by birth and a Brazilian by conviction, by heart. Moreover, I'm not a university professor, so I put down some words on paper to make sure that I don't forget anything. First of all, I'd like to express my appreciation for the honor of being the first person, what I understand, to receive this book from Decio Zylberstajn. Actually, in my opinion, it should be Decio himself who should receive this book, because he was and still is the motor of Pensa. He started this all, and I just happened to be there at the right moment, the right place, so I could assist him. So Decio, I don't want to give you this book back, but basically you should have it. I may give you another one. Actually, my experience, and I was asked to give within a 5-minute period a few memories of those early years in Brazil. And for me personally, it goes back not only to the 1990s when we started out in Brazil as Rabobank, but it goes even back to the 1974. Because in 1974, and this is a little personal, in 1974 I finished my PhD and my dissertation at the University of Florida. And I had great hopes of starting an academic career by accepting a contract from the University of Florida and USDA to go to Brasilia for a 5-year teaching and research contract and to contribute to the development of agriculture in Brazil. I thought I had it all made. However, a month before we would go down there, the Brazilian Minister of Agriculture was changed and a communist was put in place. And the communist Minister of Agriculture of Brazil did not like the Yankee contract. So the 5 people that were selected by the University of Florida and by the USDA were not given the contract. As a matter of fact, the contract was cancelled. And all of a sudden, all 5 of us were out of a job. So here you are, with a wife and 2 kiddies, feeling you have it all made and you're going to get a big academic career starting in Brazil, and bingo, it was all gone. I had to feed my wife and 2 children, so I accepted the job from a former boss who offered me a job in Europe in the agribusiness in which I worked. So I went back to Europe and I went to Portugal. Second deception. 2 months later, a big revolution in Portugal. A German friend of mine at the university sent me a memo and he said, guess what happens? You send a Dutchman to Portugal and 2 months later you have a revolution. What's wrong with you? Anyway, I went from 1974 to 1977 in Portugal, and out of Portugal I visited the University of Wageningen. Professor Meulenberg, who was mentioned before, he somehow had got in contact with me and he said, why don't you become my assistant in Wageningen? Again I thought, bingo, here comes my second chance for an academic career. However, at that period in time there was little money for research and there was little pay, and I had to pay off my big debt which I had accumulated by paying for my own study in the United States. So that was a no-no. Second deception for academic career. Then finally in 1989, it looks like times turned for the better, Rabobank, the big cooperative Dutch food and agribusiness bank, invited me to go to Brazil, this beloved country, and start setting up some representative offices in Brazil, later on in Argentina, Chile, Mexico, and so forth. The nation, just as Brazil will have. And I certainly urge the University of Wageningen to strengthen, even furthermore, the ties with the University of USP, because the future of Europe and the future of Latin America depends to a large extent of the cooperation between the 2 countries, but also because of the universities, Wageningen and USP in Brazil. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I was given 5 minutes, and I'm not much of a public speaker, so I want to finish. One final remark, Mr. Chairman. I do wish the University of Wageningen every bit of success for even at least 9 more successful chain and network conferences as this well-succeeded one today. Thank you very much. And just to prove you that I'm a poor public speaker, I forgot half of my speech. Because I had to mention that a famous Dutchman in 1637, Prince Maurits of Nassau, went to Brazil for 7 years. He stayed from 1637 to 1644 in Brazil. And he was very much impressed with the country, and he did foresee already at that time a very bright future for Brazil. So at the time we started Rabobank, we decided to make a book on this early Dutch prince and his experiences in Brazil. Decio, it's the Portuguese version. I know you will be writing a book on the influence of the Dutch in Brazil shortly, and I hope you haven't gotten this one yet. And it is in Portuguese, no Dutch, no problem. I hope it will be helpful. I'd like to offer you this.